Right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. How are y'all doing? Hey, we have plenty of tacos and water, so don't be shy. We also have a little resource table over here. I can tell you more about that later, but just so you're wondering what are all those books doing over there. Thank y'all for being here on Saturday morning, starting at 9, so you got to sleep in a little bit. But hey, we are in for a treat. I've been looking forward to this morning. We have Rich Bordner here, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him here in a minute. But you know, we've closed off on Wednesday. If you're here Wednesday, closed off our question series, and I absolutely loved it. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Just really kind of making us think. I know it was, for me, just wrestling with the questions was a lot of fun. But this is kind of the cap off for it because, you know, obviously we talk about these questions on Wednesdays, but we don't want to just keep that there. We want to, you know, go out and engage others who will definitely, you know, what we found, have different opinions, different answers to how we answer the questions. Sorry, she was looking for coffee. So today is just like equipping, like how do you navigate those conversations? I've heard, you know, many of you have probably already started to have conversations at school, and I think they will continue to just like be a part of our daily lives because of just the way the culture's going and the way Christianity goes. They kind of don't collide. That's kind of a big word, but we swim upstream. We'll put it that way. And so really the kind of the foundational verse, just as we've thought through, you know, hey, why would we do a big series like this? Why would we come together to do some equipping for engaging in conversation? And it's a familiar verse. It's 1 Peter 3. It says, and it's verse 14. It says, but even if you, let me back up to 13. Who then will harm you if you are devoted to what is good? But even if you should suffer for righteousness, you are blessed. Do not fear what they fear or be intimidated. But in your hearts regard Christ the Lord as holy, ready at any time to give a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Yet do this with gentleness and respect. And so that's exactly what we're doing here. We want to help you guys be able to give a reason for what you believe in, a reason for your hope. That's kind of like, you know, the why. Why do you believe in what you believe in? But today we'll be very practical of what's that look like in a conversation with someone who may be a little militant about their stance, or maybe they're just really pressing you with questions. That's what today's for. So the goal of this morning is that at 11 o'clock you walk out of here just confident, equipped, and just a little bit of clarity of like what would it look like for you to engage in these conversations. Sound good? All right, cool. I'm excited to introduce Mr. Rich Bordner to you. If you don't know Rich, you are about to. He's an awesome dude. And let me back up real quick. That's one thing I love about the church is God brings several different people in building His church. You know, the church is made up of His people. That's many of you. That's many of the people that you see on Sundays. And each person is gifted. Many of you are gifted, and God brings people in to make the church work and to minister to one another. And He is greatly gifted Rich, just with a very good mind. Like, he's a deep thinker. I absolutely love. I get to sit down with Rich and have coffee with him. But he's also gifted in just equipping and having teaching. He's a philosophy teacher, and just very gifted in helping students think and have conversations. And so today we're going to have him. So I'll have Rich come on up here. And the last thing I'll say before I pass it off to him, the way this morning will look like, we're going to have kind of a 30 to 45 minute role play where he's going to play the character of an atheist. Someone just kind of is really going to press you on your questions. So that's going to be fun. It's unique. So don't be shy. I want you guys to, you know, he's going to pose a question. Feel free, or no, don't just feel free. Be encouraged to stand up, give an answer, but also don't feel beat down when he fires back with something that'll really make you think. So that'll be the first 30, 45 minutes. We'll take a quick break after that, and then we'll kind of unpack the conversation and give you some tips and some ways to navigate it. So let me pray for us, and then I'm going to pass it off to Rich. Father God, thank you for this wonderful morning. Thank you for the gift of food, the gift of fellowship and friendship. Lord, I pray that this morning would be helpful, it'd be encouraging and equipping. And ultimately, Lord, it would equip us to be able to gently and humbly give a reason for the hope that we have in Jesus Christ. Lord, help us and just give us grace as we learn. In Jesus' name, amen. Give it up for Rich Ford.
Good morning. Guys, thank you. Or I should say, good job for giving up here Saturday morning. Or I guess a better term is investing. You're not really giving up. You're getting something better in return, right? Right. 9 a.m. You guys don't wake yet. My students don't wake up till noon, so this is my first period. My first period is always comatose stuff. Has anybody ever watched the 90s sitcom Family Matters? Good. So that was my favorite TV show growing up, and one of the main characters in that TV show was a guy named Steve Urkel. He was a guy I identified with because he was a nerd, and he had a crush on the neighbor girl Laura. Laura wanted nothing to do with him, thought he was disgusting and stuff. And so the whole 9 seasons is like him chasing after Laura and getting rejected time and time again. And in about the second or third season, he invents, because he's like this scientist nerd guy, so he invents what he calls the transformation chamber. So he steps into the transformation chamber, Stephen Urkel, nerd extraordinaire, and then it changes his DNA, and he comes out of the transformation chamber, no longer Steve Urkel, but Stefan Urkel, the sexy debonair guy that all the girls like swoon for, including Laura. So I don't have my transformation chamber this morning, but I do have my transformation glasses. So I'm going to put these on in just a little bit, and I'm going to become a character. I'm going to become an atheist, and we are going to converse back and forth. If you guys want to challenge me or try to persuade, that'll be good, and I might have something to put in front of you as well. So we'll do a little bit of conversation, and then we'll kind of debrief after that, after a little bit of a break. Sound good? Yeah? Okay. Just a couple of preliminary remarks here before I transform. I'm not claiming to represent all atheists here. There's a lot of different kinds of atheists. There's secular humanists, there's nihilists, there's existentialists. You don't need to know what those words mean, but just they're all different kinds. And the kind of atheist that I'm one with largely depends on how you guys respond to me. So, I might be a little cantankerous, or I might be nice. I don't know. It depends on how I'm feeling. This is though, it's based loosely on a real character. One of the gentlemen that led me to Christ in high school, this character is based off of him because he was a on-fire Christian, shared the gospel with me in high school, and then went to college, and now today he's like this really aggressive, like Richard Dawkins type evangelistic atheist, where he's posting all these snarky memes on Facebook and just hates Christianity now. So it's loosely based on my friend Ben, who actually led him to Christ. Okay. Last thing, can somebody, maybe you in the back, young man, you have a notebook out. You have a pencil? Okay. Can you take notes so that when we do debrief, we can kind of bring some of the stuff that came up, bring it back up. Cool. All right. You guys ready? All right. Here we go. So, good morning. My name is Rich Bordner. I am a philosophy and English teacher at a local high school. Thank you for inviting me to speak. This is something kind of new for me. I usually don't speak to a religious group, much less religious kids. So this is something that, honestly, I'm kind of intimidated a little bit. You guys look a little rough. I'm kind of feeling like I'm walking into the lion's den here. I don't know. So go nice on me, okay? Don't go easy on me. I'm not used to this. Maybe you're not used to this either. So let me kind of calm your nerves a little bit. In a moment, we're going to start talking back and forth, and this is going to be interactive. It's not going to be me just speaking, but I want to venture just 3 or 4 minutes of me talking, and then we can kind of get in the conversation. The first thing that I want you to know is, look, I'm a lot like you guys. Okay. I know you might have a stereotype of what an atheist is. Look, I'm not going to boost your iPhone when you're not looking. I don't go around looking for crimes to commit. I don't bathe in blood, that sort of thing. So, I find that when I do talk to Christian people on the street, they kind of have those stereotypes of atheists. Just say, look, I'm a family guy. I've got a wife. I've got two daughters. So, I'm normal. Okay, atheists are not like what you might think. I actually used to be a Christian. I used to be in your shoes. When I was in high school, I was a leader in my Fellowship of Christian Athletes chapter in my high school. I led that group, and I was a leader in my youth group. My parents raised me in a strong Christian home. They're still Christian today. But when I got to college, it was very mind-opening. I was introduced to a world that I just didn't know existed. And I was raised in a very sheltered environment. I had some friends at that time and some professors who were very gentle and very nice to me. And they just, winsomely put some questions in front of me that I didn't know how to answer. And, showed me some facts that I didn't quite fit with what I believed. And, I wrestled with it for a while, but eventually I just followed the evidence where it led. And it led away from faith. By definition, faith is what you do when you don't have the evidence. If you had evidence, then you wouldn't need faith, right? Christians say that all the time. In fact, Grant, who's my buddy, he sent me a sermon that your pastor's name is Afshin, right? Yeah. So he sent me a sermon that Afshin preached recently because he wanted me to watch it and he thought it was awesome. And so I watched it, and that's basically what your own pastor said, that Christianity is a matter of the heart. And he would rather have somebody look at that rather than somebody that has the head knowledge and the evidence. And so there you go. They're two polar opposites. And religion, because it's a matter of the heart, is something that's emotional in nature. Okay, and so I figured that out. And look, today I don't need faith. I'm a man of the evidence. And so if you want to convince me, if you want to get me to listen to you, that's what you got to give me. So don't give me any faith talk. Okay. The last thing I want to say is I need to clarify what the meaning of atheism is, because although I don't talk to a lot of church groups, I do meet Christians at work and on the street and stuff. I know Grant, we talked before. I need to clarify what atheism is, because there's a lot of misconceptions among religious groups about what that is. So some people say like, hey, you need to prove that God doesn't exist because that's what you believe. So well, hold on. Atheism is not really the belief that God doesn't exist. Atheism is not a belief system at all, really. It's not a worldview. It's not a philosophy. It's simply the lack of a belief. Okay, I lack belief in God. Now, you might be saying, what's the difference? Like you're splitting hairs. It's the same thing. Well, no. There's actually a really big difference between the two. And it helps us understand where the burden of proof lies. You guys know what the burden of proof is? It's the person who has to give evidence for their claim. That's who has the burden of proof. And in this conversation, who is that? You guys. Because you guys are claiming that God exists. I'm not making a claim. I lack a belief in God. So it's up to you guys to give me evidence first, and then we can talk. If somebody walks in here and says, hey, do you believe in the tooth fairy? No. Psst, prove the tooth fairy doesn't exist, man. You would laugh at it, right? Because you're like, I don't need to prove a tooth fairyism. That's ridiculous. It's up to you who believe in the tooth fairy to prove him, and then we can go from there. So it's the default position. It's where everybody begins. And so I have nothing to argue until you put something on the table. You see, recognize that you guys are actually atheists. Yes, it's true. You guys are atheists. You guys reject all the other gods out there. 99.99% of the gods out there. You reject Thor. You reject Ra, Krishna. The list is a mile long. The only difference between you and me is that I just add Yahweh to the mix. I just go one God further. And so when you understand why you reject all those other gods out there, you will understand why I reject yours. That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. And extraordinary claims, in order to be rational, need extraordinary evidence. So that is what atheism is. And maybe you guys can give me something, we can talk. I don't know. We'll see. So let's do this. Before we get into conversation with you and me, I want to give you guys a little bit of a warm-up. Turn to a partner, or get in a group of three if you're the odd person out, and just come up with something to say. What would you want to ask me? What would you want to say to me? converse for a minute or two, and then we will get started. All right? So go ahead and turn and talk, okay? All right, let's go ahead and finish it up. So you guys are now good and warmed up. Want to get some more tacos? Eat some more fuel for this conversation. All right, who wants to go first? Go ahead and raise your hand. And what do you want to say to an atheist? Let's put it this way. If you guys don't say something, I'll say something to you. So.
Have you ever done an in-depth study on a Bible, looking Bible, or the entire Bible?
Yeah, I've read the Bible. Yeah, I have.
Which books?
All of them. Yeah. Have you guys? Do you guys realize what's in the Bible? Like, I know that Christians are like, oh, we have the Sermon on the Mount. You guys ever actually thought about what's in there? Not just the Sermon on the Mount, but all of it? Like God says, love your neighbor, then go slaughter the Canaanites. Every man, woman, and child. That's not a good God. And that's why, one of the many reasons why I reject the Bible, is because there's things like that in it that have, throughout human history, ever since the Bible's been written, have perpetuated systemic oppression and hegemony upon minority groups. So things like that, exclusionary doctrines like, God commanding the slaughter of the Amalekites, has been used throughout to just basically perpetuate things like misogyny, systemic racism, things like that. So yeah, that's one of the reasons why I reject the Bible. Somebody over here had a question? Raise your hand up.
So if you read the Bible, then you would know that Jesus had that there were 500 witnesses of Jesus.
There's what?
If you have actually read the Bible, then you would know that there was 500 witnesses of Jesus of being alive.
So what? I mean, that's written in the Bible. How do you know that actually is the case?
Because it's not only in the Bible, but you have several books that even back that up.
Like what?
Like you have the Gospels, you have also in the Old Testament that even talks about it, you have in the New Testament too.
Okay, those books are in the Bible. How do you know the Bible is reliable? How do you know that it's telling the truth?
If it wasn't, then why would Christianity exist? If it was true, what would be the purpose of us being here? What would be the purpose of the other religions that believe in one God?
You see, here's the problem with that. You talk to every other religious believer, every other religious persuasion, they say the exact same thing. If it wasn't for the Quran's divine inspiration, well, Islam wouldn't exist. If it wasn't for Joseph Smith and the golden plates, Mormonism wouldn't exist. That doesn't get you anywhere. Look, here's the thing in the Bible. Here's one of the many things in the Bible. If you examine the written manuscripts is like the written copies, handwritten copies before the printing press, right? There are over 300,000 errors in the handwritten manuscripts. That's almost double the number of errors than there are words in the New Testament. There's 156,000 words in the New Testament, but there's 300,000 changes that have been made in the handwritten manuscripts. With that sort of record, how can we have any confidence that the Bible we have today is the one that was originally written? Go ahead.
Why does it matter that there's all those errors? What if they're punctuation errors on comma or something?
Well, they're not. You ever played the game of telephone? You start with a message and then 13 whispers later it's something totally different than what the messenger intended. That's why it matters. When there's errors that proliferate, I mean, in order, you guys believe that the Bible is divinely inspired, right? But if you can't know what the original Bible said, what good is it doing you? So, I mean, it talks about Jesus and these witnesses and all, so on and so forth. We have no clue if that is what was originally written. In fact, if you compare Jesus to a lot of the other mythical gods in other religions at the time, you will see a striking number of parallels. You know, for example, Mithras, who was a god in the Greek pantheon, died, rose again, born on December 25th, had 12 disciples, you know, on and on down the line. Same with Isis, an Egyptian deity. So it begins to look like Jesus is a copycat savior. It's just kind of been recycled, you know, in human history many different times.
You also see a lot of differences in that God actually loves people, and that it's actually like he actually has a personal relationship with you, and so it's a lot different than the other like Greek gods who just like don't really care and fight amongst themselves and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Couple things about that. Look. Number one, it goes back to what I said earlier. God says, love thy neighbor, then he says, go slaughter the
You
cannibals.
also have to look at that in the context of the Bible, because I don't know exactly where that is, but
1 Samuel 15. That's one of the places. There's others.
let me look that up and then I'll see. what-
1 Samuel, read 1 Samuel 15:3 to the class. And I got a hard copy Bible. Actually, cut to the chase.
I have it.
Oh, you got it? Okay.
And Samuel said to Saul, the Lord sent me to anoint you king over the people of Israel. Now therefore listen to the words of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I have noted what Goliath did to Israel, and opposing them on the way when they came up out of Egypt. Now go strike Amalek and devote to destruction. All that they have, do not spare them, but kill both man and woman, child and infant, ox, sheep, camel, and dog. But
Look, I'll give you a response in a second. I don't care what context you're going to talk about. That's not a loving God. Okay? Imagine if Donald Trump somehow got back on Twitter and tweets out that, you know, God spoke to him and is bringing judgment on the Muslims in this country. And so he commands the church to go kill every man, woman, child in Islamic synagogues, mosques. You guys would not give him a pass for a second, and rightfully so. But you give God a pass in the Bible. I don't know. That's not loving. The only other thing I would remark is, you know, this talk about a loving God. That is how oppressors talk to basically calm their nerves about their oppression. This is the exact same thing that European missionaries said when they went into cultures and wiped them out in the name of the love of Jesus. They said they were loving their neighbor by doing this. Wiped out the Native Americans in this country, brought British imperialism through, you know, white European missionaries to Africa. This talk about loving is exactly how the oppressors talk to justify the oppression. So I'm not buying a bit of it.
Okay. The only problem with the Donald Trump metaphor is God said at the end of the Old Testament that there would be no more prophets. So that doesn't work with Donald Trump.
I mean, that's really convenient for you to say. You know, give me another reason why why that command of God in the Bible is actually something good. You can't just say, well, you know, there's no more prophets there. That's totally missing the point. You have a follow-up?
Sorry, I'm just looking for the passage.
Which passage?
In 1 Samuel 1.
Okay.
I think the problem here is you're comparing God to humans, which we believe God is divine and that he is all-knowing and all-powerful, and when he created the world, he had a set idea for what it wanted to be. So if he wants to get rid of something or order people killed, then that's what should happen. And that I think that it doesn't contradict that, because God also splits open the earth and swallows people whole. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't love us, because doing those things helps us.
So whatever God wants to do by definition is good. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Would you give Allah a pass? So Allah is God. He can do whatever he wants. You're like, no, he's actually got to be good. Like, I don't know if you guys realize what you're saying. Like, you're totally giving God a blank check, whatever he wants to do. So he could command anything in the Bible. He could command that sexual assault is moral, and now you go do it. What kind of sense does that make? I don't know, guys. Come on, give me some sort of evidence that actually defends your position. Give me some reasons to think that God exists. Like I said, I've got nothing to defend here. So, what do you got?
God isn't just loving; He's also just. So when people don't follow His commandments, then there's a punishment for that. He doesn't just let everyone get mad.
How is slaughtering not just every man but woman and child? How is that just?
We don't know.
Because
It's not.
No.
It's not at all. Okay, guys, we're getting kind of stuck on this Old Testament God. I think I've got a pretty good case. The Old Testament God and the New Testament God too is pretty malevolent. So, what kind of give me some reasons to think that what you guys believe is true. Give me some evidence here.
If it says in Genesis, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God.
Okay.
Again, you go into, it says it again back in, it goes into Exodus, and you see it in, all throughout the Bible it talks about God. Matter of fact, the Old Testament proves what happened in the New Testament, and the stuff in the New Testament proves what happened.
How so?
Talked about in the Old Testament.
Give me some details. Don't just assert it.
Like when
Again,
he
that which
said
can be
Jesus-
asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So you're just kind of saying it.
When in the Old Testament, it said that that there would be a Savior that would come and ride on a mule, on a peaceful ride. Same thing happened in the New Testament. It said Jesus came on, riding on an old mule, while people were there with palm trees and branches and taking their clothes and jackets and basically
Okay.
being
Yes. The Lord of the Rings claimed that Frodo took the ring into Mordor and tossed it into Mount Doom, in the fires of Mount Doom. Should I believe it just because it claims it? Why think the Bible is trustworthy? You keep talking about the Bible. Why should I trust it? Give me one reason external to the Bible. Don't just quote the Bible, because that you're arguing in a circle. You're saying, it says in the Bible, therefore I believe it. No, that's not a good argument. Go ahead.
Well, other books besides the Bible say that Jesus is real and that he was a prophet and that he walked on this earth. But,
Give me an example.
like the Quran says it, or
You believe the Quran?
No.
Okay.
But I'm saying that there's other historical accounts that Jesus was on this earth.
Okay. Give me an example of not a religious document, but something from history that tells us that Jesus, not just Jesus arose. That's pretty much historical. Jesus existed. We know that. But you guys don't just believe Jesus walked on the earth. You believe that he was literally God in human flesh, and then he rose from the dead. Think about it. If Grant walks in here and claims that he died, and one of you prayed for him and he rose from the dead, that would be pretty extraordinary. You'd have to see some evidence to believe that. So, give me something. What do you got? Come on.
What are you trying to convince us of? That God doesn't exist, or that he's not a loving God?
You guys are trying to convince me of both.
Well,
Remember, I've got nothing to prove.
then I feel like we're getting stuck on that. We're trying to argue that our God is loving. But also, if we're trying to convince him that he exists, then we can also try and, I'm confused what we're arguing here right now. I feel like we've gotten stuck so.
Well, it started off with the loving God thing, but we dispatched with that, so I'm just asking if you guys can give me any reason, any sort of reasons for anything you believe. I mean, pick one, Cowboys.
It's in the Roman manuscripts that Jesus actually walked on this earth and he actually died. It's like there were.
What are the Roman manuscripts?
They're papers that were created in Rome by like hundreds of eyewitness accounts that worked for in Rome, like telling all the.
That sounds like some real Da Vinci Code stuff. I don't know, like give me something specific. Like, look, I'll help you out here. Okay, I'll give you an example, something that Christians often put out there when we're talking about this subject. Josephus. Josephus was a Jewish historian that wrote right around the turn of the century, 80, 90, 80, 100, and he writes about Jesus. Have you ever read about Josephus? Okay, so that's kind of what I mean. When I say, give me an example of something outside the Bible that substantiates something that you believe in it. That's an example. Now, just to kind of keep going with this, yes, Josephus does mention Jesus. There's two different places. But, at least in the first place, historians widely regard the first section that he's talking about Jesus in his Antiquities as largely a fabrication that was later added by a monk copyist, because if you read it, you can kind of tell that there's a historical core, like there's a man named Jesus that existed, that was a wise teacher, but then there's this extrapolations that, like, he was the Christ, he was the Messiah, he rose from the dead. And look, Josephus was a Jewish historian, so he was an Orthodox Jew. One of the things that Jews believe is that stuff about Jesus isn't true. So if that was coming from Josephus himself, he wouldn't be Jewish, he'd be Christian. And so we pretty much know that that's an interpolation. It was kind of added later. And then the other part in Josephus just mentions that James was the brother of Jesus, who some thought was the Christ. So all that gives you is exactly what we know, that there was a Jesus, and that, after the turn of the century, some people were walking around that thought he was the Messiah. But that doesn't give you anything that you guys believe as true, like, any sort of religious doctrine. So that's what I'm asking about. Give me something about that. Somebody else had a hand up here? Let's go. You've had a couple. I'll come back to you in a little bit, but I want to get some people who haven't really.
So hasn't the Bible been said to be like the most reliable source out of every book? Like, wouldn't you agree?
Make the case. No, I don't agree. Make the case.
Like, it's scientifically true that, like, the Bible is the most reliable book out of every book.
Okay, you just repeated yourself. Giving an assertion to prove an assertion doesn't advance the ball down the field. Give me some evidence. Give me an argument. Don't just say the Bible's reliable. How do you know? Well, it's scientifically proven. Well, how do you know? Well, because it's reliable. You're arguing in a circle. You have a follow-up?
There have been many documents that have been found of, like, the original copies, too. So, like, that is from the beginning, like, things that have been found.
Okay, we don't have the original copies. The earliest copy we have is a really tiny, tiny fragment that's got just a couple of words on it of the Gospel of John, and it dates to about AD 120. So that was, if you're giving an early date to the Gospel of John, which I don't believe the Gospel of John was written early, but let's say I go with you guys, and the Gospel of John was written about AD 70. AD 120, that's 50 years after the original copy was written. That's the earliest copy we have. It's just this small fragment. Most copies are way after that, and then if you compare them, there's a lot of errors. There's a lot of variances. So, no, I don't think we have reliable documentation at all. We'll go here, then we'll go here.
Okay, so back to present day. How many times has science tried to disprove the Bible? A lot, right?
I mean, what do you mean by science tried to disprove the Bible?
Well, they try to say, like, oh, this isn't true because there's no way that it's possible. Like, for example, Noah and the ark. It's about a huge boat that God told Noah to build, but everyone didn't believe him, and God sent a huge flood, and Noah got all the animals in the ark and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the boat landed on a big mountain. And from this day, like, scientists try to prove that that couldn't be possible.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you look on that mountain, there is a huge boat mark on the mountain.
They found Noah's Ark.
They found like the outline of Noah's Ark on the mountain.
Ah, so we just have like a dent in the mountain.
Yes, a huge dent in the mountain that is like the shape of Noah's Ark, and it's about the size that it says in the Bible.
It's like that lady in Mexico who saw Jesus in her taco.
You know?
You look at the mountain, you see a dent, you see, it looks like the outline of a boat. Look, how many dents are in a mountain? I mean, it's a mountain, guys, it's not like a monolith.
Yeah,
You
but
know,
how
you
many mountains have a huge boat dent in it?
I venture to believe that if we looked at pretty much any mountain, I could pick out some dent somewhere that looked kind of like it. I could probably make that case. I don't know what that gets you. I'll give you the last word.
Well, there are other ones like David and the Goliath, and I'm pretty sure somewhere that scientists try to prove that it's not real, but they found huge, like human bones that are the size of Goliath. And so,
Okay, how do we know that's Goliath?
well, how many other huge giants are there throughout history?
You mean like Yao Ming and LeBron James?
No, Goliath is way bigger than them, and just like,
I mean, I know you guys are kind of short, but big people are all over the place, you know? What are the chances that we find some big bones somewhere? Oh, this guy's Goliath. I don't know.
I think the tallest man, like, is like 8 foot something, right?
Okay. Mhm.
And in the Bible it says that Goliath is like over 10 foot or something.
Yeah, I think you're doing a great job of talking yourself out of what you believe, because you just gave an excellent reason to discount the existence of Goliath, not affirm it. Okay?
You were saying that the Bible isn't reliable and that it has changed over the years from the original manuscripts, but a study was done and it said that only 2% of it has changed. And you said that there's lots of errors, and there's 3 to 4 errors, tiny errors for each word, but 50% of them are grammatical and 1% are theological, and those are said elsewhere in the Bible.
Okay, some of them are substantial. Let me give you an example. 1 John 5:7, that's on the Trinity, which is like one of the core things that you guys believe. But aside from that, even if the vast majority of them are insubstantial, if you add them up, it becomes substantial. So again, let's think of the telephone game. Okay, we start at this end with a name, you know, Rich, for example. And then you whisper it on down the line, and at the end, it becomes a curse word that you guys can't utter in church. And that's pretty substantial. There's like, just from person to person, there's no big leap, no big change, but there's just like one little itty-bitty utterance change each step of the way. And, you know, where it gets to a curse word that ain't my name. You know, same thing applies to the Bible. You got to follow it?
I guess I'd just say that it's been copying the manuscripts has been a very guarded process, and there have been different versions that have had to be weeded out of people trying to add things or take things away. But over time, you can look back to versions that have been living for decades, and you can still see that there's minimal changes, and the changes that there are not necessarily contradictory, but grammatical, or maybe someone made an error, but those ones weren't the ones that were copied down thousands of times after that.
Okay, sure. Look, I've said what I'm going to say there. I think it still stands. Let me give you some additional stuff to think about, because I don't want to get caught up on manuscripts the whole time here. Even if I agree with you that we can know the Bible that was originally written was the one that we have today, how do you know that it's telling the truth? How do you know that the writers of the Bible, we don't know that it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all those guys. It was just names attached to them by church tradition later on. How do you know they were telling the truth? The earliest one, you know, John, I know it said 70 AD. Most scholars think that John was written 80, 90, 80, 100. That's, you know, 80, 90. That's 50 years after the events themselves. Huge amount of time. So how do you know that? If you actually read the Bible closely, you'll see contradictions. And it goes back to that earlier problem of the God in the Bible is not a good God. He's just not somebody that I can worship and follow, who is commanding the slaughter of, a neighboring tribe for what? For being a different religion? Sounds kind of petty to me. Sounds kind of jealous. So you've got a lot of hurdles to overcome if you're going to convince me that the Bible is something worth paying attention to. All right, young man in the back.
This is the Nicene Creed. We believe in one God, the Father, the Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and of all that is seen and unseen. We believe in one Lord Jesus Christ, the
Okay,
Son of God.
let me jump in, because I don't, we got about 10 minutes left, so I kind of know where you're going here. I know the Nicene Creed. I was raised in a Christian home. I was raised to recite it. Do you know when the Nicene Creed was written? 4th century. Okay? It's a creed. It's just a statement of beliefs that people at the time believed. It gives you no evidence. And it was, it was arrived at through a political process. A bunch of priests who had power at the time got together and decided what they were going to put their official stamp on in the church, and kind of everybody else had to follow along. So it was a total power move. And it silenced other tribes, other versions of Christianity that were floating around at the time. You guys believe in the Nicene Creed just because it was the official narrative written, but that's just because some dudes in power, some white dudes in power just, decided it to be so. That's the only reason why you believe it. Do you have a follow-up?
A creed is, by definition, a creed is a true statement.
No. Muslims have creeds. Mormons have creeds. If you're going to define a creed as by definition true, you're getting yourself into a lot of problems. A creed is a statement of belief. Okay? It doesn't mean that beliefs are true. You got to argue for it. Somebody else, go ahead.
So you don't believe in a God, but then can you explain how humans came into being then by your belief?
It's perfectly reasonable for me to say, I don't know. Okay? When we are confronted with a mystery in the physical realm, we don't just say, well, we don't know how it could have happened, therefore God must have done it. When we've done that in our scientific history, every single time religion has lost. They thought that lightning used to be caused by Thor. They thought that thunder used to be caused by Zeus because they didn't know. Like, man, this is an amazing thing. How could this happen? Therefore, the gods must have done it. And then some stubborn scientists showed them that, oh no, it's a perfectly reasonable natural explanation. So what you're engaging in is called godly gaps reasoning, where you lack an explanation for something, you lack knowledge, and you plug God in that gap. That's a really bad way of reasoning because over time, science plugs those gaps in knowledge, and religion's got to vacate the premises. Now, more directly to your question, there's a very easy answer to our question, the question of origins. How did the Earth come about? The Big Bang.
There's no way. They say that there's nothing before, and then, I don't know exactly how. Two particles come from nowhere, and then they create an explosion.
Okay, so
nothing cannot come from nothing.
Right, so there's a couple of things here. Yeah, you guys snicker. I don't know why you're snickering. Have you guys ever
Can
read
I say something real quick?
No. Have you ever read a single scientist that talked about the Big Bang? Who?
But already, two
Hold on.
college students decided to do an experiment to create improved evolution.
2 college students?
Yes, who are studying evolution, and with their professor.
Okay,
They decided to create amino acids to see if they could produce life, create life. The farthest they got were proving that amino acids could be created by just putting chemical compounds together.
okay, so
They were
you're
not-
talking about evolution. I'm talking about the Big Bang. Two separate
Evolution
things.
and the Big Bang go hand in hand.
No, they don't. Big Bang and evolution are 2 different things. The Big Bang is a model of cosmology. Evolution is on the level of biology after the Earth, came to be. So hold on, I need to finish this. Like, you guys were kind of snickering when I'm talking about the Big Bang. There is mountains of evidence for the Big Bang happening. Let me give you just 3 pieces. Okay, 3 pieces. Now, I see you guys shaking your head, but I'm pretty confident that you have not read a single cosmologist or physicist that talked about our origins. I'm pretty confident that at your age you have not read any Stephen Hawking, no Lawrence Krauss, none of that. So I think your confidence is misplaced. Now, to the question, One of the pieces of evidence that we know, how we know the Big Bang happened, is the cosmic background microwave radiation. You measure that radiation in the cosmos, and the amount of it that is present today is the exact amount that the Big Bang model predicts should be present. Second piece of evidence is the redshift in the universe. So you look out in our telescope, and as you see, you get further and further out. You see galaxies further away from us. They are redshifted. They look more red than they do, any of the other colors, and so that tells us that the universe is expanding. And so that speaks to an explosion that began it all. The third one is the second law of thermodynamics. Okay, just basic laws of physics. So I could go on. There's lots of evidence, but it's pretty solid. And so you're going to have to give me more than a smirk to overcome that. Go ahead.
It's like the Earth, if it was moved like maybe an inch or so, then life on Earth wouldn't exist. So how like an explosion would land Earth in that exact spot where life?
Okay, yeah, you're talking about anthropic principles. Okay, these are, looking at the exact nature of the cosmological constants in the universe and saying, like, it looks like it's fine-tuned for life. That's God the Gap's reasoning again. That's saying, we don't know how it could have come about by natural means, so we're going to plug God in this gap. Even if I didn't have an explanation, it's perfectly reasonable for me to say, I don't know. That doesn't mean God did it. It doesn't give you an advantage at all. Now, if we look at the quantum level, if you do quantum physics and you look at the quantum level, we can see electrons and subatomic particles coming into and out of existence uncaused. There is an indeterminacy that reigns at the quantum level. Okay? And the quantum vacuum is nothing. It's not like there's no physical stuff in there. So we see electrons coming into and out of existence uncaused. There's no reason for us to say that the Big Bang was any different. And this is something that guys like Stephen Hawking in his book, The Grand Design, and Lawrence Krauss in his writings, they talk about all the time. Cowboys and then young man back.
How could that have come into existence if you can't create something from nothing?
I just told you that we see that happening at the quantum level.
But those had to come from somewhere.
No. The quantum vacuum is nothing. It's not like there's a bunch of furniture pieces at the quantum level. And I know that sounds kind of fanciful. You guys kind of roll your eyes, you're like, you're saying something comes from nothing. Look, the picture of the world that science gives us is often pretty counterintuitive, but it's what we know. So, for example, this podium here, to our Newtonian eyes, looks solid, right? It feels solid. I try to pass my hand through it, nothing's going on there. But if you look at it at the subatomic level, the level of atoms and electrons and stuff, is almost completely empty space. It's like 99% empty. That's the picture of the world that we see when you get down to the nitty-gritty. But it just doesn't really match with what our eyes see. So, saying that we get electrons popping into and out of existence uncaused, you guys have trouble believing it just because it doesn't meet your experience of the world at the macro level. But nevertheless, that's what we know. Okay? You get the last one.
We may never actually completely prove that the Bible exists with scientific evidence, because that's just way back. But I personally know by faith that it exists because of the things that have happened to me. And so it's like, so it would be hard for me to prove to you that it exists by saying a bunch of things that actually, that really, in history, things that survive. But because I know that happened from my life, that I can say that.
Okay, this is a great one to end on. You're punting to faith. Okay, remember what I said earlier, that faith is what you do when you don't have the evidence. So you guys have been unable to give me any sort of evidence for your beliefs and substantiate it, and now you're saying, I just have faith based on an experience. Look, number one, experience is something that is completely unverifiable. You have an experience, great. Muslims have the same experiences. If you talk to Mormons, they'll talk about the burning bosom in the heart. They'll be really, really sure that Joseph Smith is God's prophet and that the Book of Mormon is God's revelation. And they base their faith on experience. And so if you're going to, that's good for you if you need that to kind of emotionally get through the day. But I don't. I'm perfectly fine. I'm actually happier now as an atheist than I ever was as a Christian because I get to follow the truth where it leads. I value the truth more than feeling good about my life, and that's made all the difference. Okay, I would love to get you to talk, but we're out of time. The atheist is gone. All right, so breathe.
Breathe.
That was a character. Everything I said has an answer to it. We're not going to get to everything today, but we'll get to some of it. So I just wanted to kind of calm you down before we take a break. Again, that was a character. There's one reason to believe Christianity is true, and that's because, actually, let me back it up. There's one reason to be a Christian, and that's because Christianity is true. That's not a faith statement, that's a knowledge statement. I think you can know that Christianity is true. You don't have to have, blind faith. So I'm just going to put that out there at the outset. We'll kind of go through some of the details when we come back. But we're going to take about a 5 to 10 minute break. So go get a drink, go to the bathroom, calm your nerves, talk to each other, and come up with some things that you want to go back over in the next hour. So like, hey, you said this, how could I have handled this better? All right, because that's what we're going to get into in the second hour. We're going to start the debrief. All right? Go take a break, guys. Rolling? Okay.
Rolling.
You guys brought your heart rate back down? All right, so we're gonna start to slowly unpack this through the next hour. We will get to your questions in a moment, but I want to cover a few things first. Number one, I want you to turn to a partner like you did in the beginning, and I want you to give yourself a number on a scale of 1 to 10. So even if you didn't speak, you are hopefully, that's why you're here, tracking the conversation in your head. So if you didn't say anything, still give yourself a score. So 1 would be, I totally have my way with you. 10 would be the exact opposite. Now I don't want to couch this in competitive terms because this is not a competition. This is a conversation, and you're learning how to be a witness. You're learning how to be like Jesus and converse with people who don't believe what you do. So that's the ultimate frame. But I want to start here with this scale of 1 to 10 thing, just so we kind of have a place to launch ourselves from. So turn to a partner. What score would you give yourself on a scale of 1 to 10? Go.
10. Not sure if we can find so I can turn his words against.
Cole, what do you give yourself?
Wait. Okay, so explain the numbers.
Okay, guys.
He destroyed John's team, I'll destroy you.
Okay. So just shout out some numbers here.
10.
No way.
Sorry, sweetie, a 10 would be if you converted him, and you did not.
You're confident, I'll give you that. I don't know about a 10. I don't know, man. What are some other ones?
2.
2, okay, 2. 3. You gave yourself a 5, or is
No,
that?
I give them a
You
5.
give them a 5, okay. 5, 2, 3.
Sorry, is this about like how it affected us or how we affected you?
I'm getting at it. How did you do in the conversation in terms of answering the challenges and being able to dialogue effectively? So what do you say? What would you, 2? Okay, so low of 2, high of 5. The 10 is an outlier, so I don't know about that. So let's say, I gotta give you, it's gonna sound harsh, but hear me out, okay? If this was a test in school, like say in physics, and you got a 5 out of 10, what grade would that be? Okay, this ain't California, this is Texas. What grade do you need to get to be passing in Texas?
70.
70s, that's a big fat,
Yeah.
that's not me giving you guys a score, that's you guys giving yourselves a score, okay? You bring an F in a physics test home to mom and dad, how are they gonna feel about it?
Do better.
Yeah, you might be, might have no iPhone for a while, yeah. So my intention here isn't to belittle you. I don't want to depress you. I don't want to make you feel bad about yourself. Because look, your identity is in Christ, not your performance. Okay? You have the freedom to fail here. Okay? This ain't the end of the world. But you do need an honest assessment of where you're at in your knowledge and in your ability to talk with, other people. It's just like a scrimmage. It's like who here plays a sport? Okay, volleyball, I take it? Yeah? Or is that just a shirt? Okay. You have scrimmages before the season? Yeah, so you do a scrimmage, and after the scrimmage, your coach is like, man, we suck, we got something to do. Right? So it's the same thing here. This is supposed to be motivating. So it's like a mirror, If you don't have a mirror, how do you know that there's something hanging off your face when you go to school? Okay, so this is kind of holding up a mirror to you in the hopes that you'll kind of take this kick in the pants and be motivated to study. Okay, so there's that. All right, so next turn and talk. Turn to a partner and answer 3 questions. Number 1, how would you describe the conversation? What words come to mind? Number 2, how do you think you treated me as an atheist? How do you think you interacted with me? Okay, and then number 3, what was going on in your heart as we talked? So maybe a little intimidated, maybe a little like bothered and agitated, or whatever it is. Might be positive. I don't know. I just want to hear what was going on in here. So number 1, how would you describe the conversation? What words come to mind? How did you interact with me as an atheist? And what was going in your heart as the conversation progressed? Okay, so talk and then tell me.
Yes. How do you feel like God treated you?
I mean, we didn't like.
I think y'all treated him pretty well.
I think, yeah, it wasn't like we were like.
How'd you feel in your heart?
That was hard.
I felt attacked. Yeah. Not in a bad sense, just like he was very back what we said earlier.
Okay. All right, let's come back. All right, let's start going through these. So, what words come to mind to describe the conversation?
Aggressive, or I was thinking that it felt like you were more there trying to be right and less there to have a conversation. Is kind of what it felt like.
Yeah. I was intentionally pushing your buttons, by the way. I was kind of being condescending. I was being a little aggressive. I interrupted you just to kind of see how you'd react. All right, it's not like you've never met anybody like that in life before. Right? So now here's the question. I'm going to get some more answers from you in just a second, but I want to go down that road just a little bit here. Do you get to respond in kind? If I'm being, pugnacious, do you get to be pugnacious in return? No. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be a doormat. It doesn't mean you have to be like typical evangelical nice. Like, you can be forthright. You can be direct. You can put some questions to me that kind of put me on the spot. But you don't get to be condescending or be mean, do some of the little shifty tactics that I was doing. Just make sure that whatever bar the atheist is lowering himself to, or whoever it is you're talking to, you don't lower yourself to the same standards. You don't get that. You don't need to do that. Okay. So yeah, I think aggressive would be a good way to describe it. What else? What are some other words?
Stressful.
Stressful. Okay.
Philosophically lacking on our part, just knowledge.
Okay.
Research.
All right. So you figured out that my pants fell down. I must need a belt. Get the metaphor? Yeah. Okay. So somebody else over here. I think you saying something?
Oh, I said scared.
Scary. Why that?
I mean, it was just scary to think about all that, because like, I don't know, I feel like at any moment that like, you could end up being right, and like, we could be wrong. But I just kept breaking myself like, no, that's not true, like, that's not true. And it was just really scary. It was like a battle between myself.
Okay, good.
Brutal.
You said what?
Brutal. It was just, we kept trying to fire at you, and you kept firing back at us harder than we could have fired at you. It was brutal.
Yeah. Good. Anybody else? Intimidating. Why that? Okay, good.
It was a bit confusing.
Why was it confusing?
I didn't know about some like the material you brought up, or some like the questions you posed at us.
First time you ever heard some of that stuff?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So here's the deal. I'm going to talk about this at the end, but I can kind of give you a preview now. Part of the reason why we're doing this is to motivate you to study more. The more that you do that, the less you feel those scary emotions. Okay? The more knowledge you have, the more confident you get. And I don't mean in a knowledge puffs up sense, but I mean in the good sense. Okay? Here's a little proverb. It's not in the book of Proverbs, but it's a proverb. Okay? The more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in battle. Alright? So I'm hoping that this motivates you to go study. We will get into specifics in a little bit, but please believe me when I say that what I said today in the role play, it all has answers. Guys, our tradition, we have an embarrassment of riches. Nobody is asking a question today that hasn't been asked before. It's all been, there's nothing new under the sun. Our ancestors, our mothers and fathers in the faith, have been wrestling with these questions for centuries, for thousands of years, and they've come up with good answers. And we have a very deep bench now. And the more that you study, the more that you will see that. And the more that it will calm your nerves when you're in a conversation like that. Okay? So, the more you study, you might have an emotional reaction in your heart, but you'll be able to recognize that and kind of put it to the side and like, all right, let's focus on, get down to brass tacks here. Okay? What was the other question here? You guys kind of already answered what was going on in your heart. So like scared, intimidated, stuff like that. So we covered all those questions. All right, so let's start to get into some of the tactics here. Now, I did have some arguments, but a lot of it was rhetorical moves. You guys know what rhetoric is? Rhetorical, that word. It just means the words that I used to kind of frame and dress up the conversation. All right, so it was more that was intimidating than it was the actual substance of what I was saying. So it was like, you ever read the worst case scenario handbook? Has anybody ever heard of that book? No? Oh man, you guys are missing out. You've read it before? Okay, good on you. So guys, go get the worst case scenario handbook. It's necessary for life. It tells you how to escape a mountain lion if you're attacked in the woods. So really good stuff, like useful, practical. All right, so if you read the worst case scenario handbook, how does it tell you to escape from a mountain lion? Well, it tells you to make yourself big, so flare your jacket out and yell and scream with a deep voice, the mountain lion, in the hopes that he thinks that you're a bear. It's like, I'm out here, I don't want to mess with a bear. So that's kind of what I was doing a lot. And that's probably the majority of what made it intimidating and scary. Now, what were some of the little tactics that I was doing, the rhetorical moves that kind of like set you back a little bit?
Interrupting us.
Okay, yeah, interrupting. Right, good.
Probably like presenting us with hard questions or asking like why. You're always coming up with a why scenario, like you're always telling us to explain. And you're like, well, you're just using the Bible. But is there actual evidence that's not done in the Bible? Those ones just...
I actually think there's something that you guys can learn from that tactic. Because you're right, I was doing that, but you guys can do the same thing. Because part of the thing is this is another thing I'm going to explain later, but you took the bait when I defined atheism as the default position. And so you guys shoulder the burden of proof, but I still do have a burden of proof as an atheist. I still have to substantiate the things that I was saying, and you guys never Well, you kind of did, but not as much as you should. So you can ask why. You can ask me to explain. You can ask me for those reason-giving questions. That would be kind of a good way to turn the tables, so to speak, and make me show what I've heard on. Over here and then over here.
So you said, like, we could ask why, but it felt like anytime we did that, you would just say the thing, well, it's okay if I don't know why.
Yeah. I mean, that is kind of a good point, because if you're engaging in God-of-the-gas reasoning, you don't, that is a poor form of reasoning. So if I don't know how it happened, that is fine. But I made claims that I needed to justify. Okay, so for example, let me kind of give you one here. Well, we did talk about the Big Bang, getting something from nothing, and I talked about quantum physics. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. We'll get there. We'll get there. But yeah, you know, I was making claims that I needed to justify, and you guys were perfectly within your rights to ask me the why too. Over here and then over here.
Yeah, so like not everything that you said is true, especially like with everything with the Big Bang and the science behind that. Not all of that was like, you just use big words to kind of dress it up, but that actually like addressing.
Okay, so I do need to make a little bit of a correction, but the kernel, the good part of what you said is I was using big words. Okay, so let me come back to that. The whole stuff about the second law of thermodynamics and the redshift and stuff, that is actual evidence for the Big Bang. Okay, what was that?
Well, the second law of thermodynamics and the Big Bang Theory are not 100% in line with each other.
Like the usable energy in the cosmos is winding down, right?
Yes, that
So
part is.
that means that the tank can be filled up. Yeah, so that's what I was referring to. But so the young man in the neon jacket over here came up with those words, and you know, even though the Big Bang happened, it still needs a cause, and that's where the conversation needed to go. You need to press me more on that. Okay, so I actually think Big Bang it fits really well in a Christian worldview. It's not like it's not like a piece of evidence against God's existence. So you have nothing to fear with that evidence I was talking about. Now, the good part of your comment is you talk about big words. So I used words like systemic hegemonic oppression and the quantum level.
Extrapolations?
Extrapolation or interpolation, right? So words like that, they can be intimidating, right? It's called, the technique that I was using was called blinding by science or blinding by jargon. And the technique is, I use big words when I comment and really heady concepts, and I kind of condescend them and, oh, go read Stephen Hawking. You haven't read Stephen Hawking, have you? With it, why are you talking to me? You know, things like that. So name dropping, using big words like that, in the hopes that you go like, man, I've never even heard of Stephen Hawking. Interpolation, what is that? Like, what is hegemony? It sounds like what grows on a corn stalk. Like I don't know what he's talking about. So he must be really smart. And he must be right. That's the effect of that technique. Okay, just because I'm using big words doesn't mean I'm right. Just because I'm name dropping Stephen Hawking and Lawrence Krauss and people you've never heard of, you don't need to be intimidated by that. Okay, people do that all the time, right? Again, I'm making myself bigger than I am. Doing the old, I got a lot of bluster. Okay, let's do one more.
Kind of a question. Was defining faith with your own definition there at the beginning, was that like intentional?
Aha! Taste this soup. I've got no spoon. Aha! Coming to America? Man, you guys are raised in the wrong decade. Your parents are dropping the ball. You have to go home and talk to them. It's like, Mom and Dad, what's Coming to America? What's Family Matters?
Great movie.
Man. I get the same reaction from my students. You know, I say, sweep the leg. And they don't say, yes, sensei, immediately. Like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Anyway, yeah, Grant. So that is another technique. What I was doing there is called attacking a straw man. Attacking a straw man is a logical fallacy. A logical fallacy is a mistake in logical thinking. So I see the young man, you've got CDA shorts. Do you go to Corndale?
Yes, sir.
What grade are you in right now?
I'm in 9th grade.
So you taking logic in middle school? Okay, so you know what straw man fallacy is, right?
I've heard of it.
Okay, so the straw man fallacy is when you, rather than addressing what your opponent really believes, you set up a weaker version of it, and then you attack that. And then you pretend like you defeated the real thing. So it's like, you know, if I was in the UFC in the cage and I'm fighting Kamaru Usman, who's like this, you know, he would rip my head off. Okay, so instead of fighting him, I put a cardboard cutout of him in the middle of the cage, and I, you know, jab, jab, shin kick, and down goes the cardboard cutout, and I pretend like I've really defeated the champ, when I've done nothing of the sort. Okay, so with faith, right off the get-go, I defined it in really shiesty terms. I defined it in unbiblical terms. I said that faith, by definition, is what you do when you don't have evidence. Okay, and if you read the Bible, you see that's not the version of faith that's in the Bible. Okay, in the Bible, faith is a step of trust based on what you have reason to believe is true. So think about it in a personal relationship. You don't just like trust somebody. That trust has to be earned, right? So we see Jesus do this in the Gospels. He doesn't say, just believe me, just have blind faith. That's the purpose of his miracles. That's why when he, the paralytic who was raised, who was lowered from the roof, and he forgave his sins, and people are like, what are you doing? And he doesn't say, you know, just have faith in me. What are you doing? Just believe. He tells the guy to get up, take his mat, and leave. And he says, I'm doing this so that you may know that I have authority to forgive sins. And that's all over the place. And Paul, in 2 Corinthians 5:7, when he says, we walk by faith, not by sight. Some people say, like, well, there you go. Faith is opposite of reason. Faith and sight. Aha. You know, we walk by faith, not by sight. Well, it doesn't say we walk by faith, not by evidence. It doesn't say we walk by faith, not by reason. It says we walk by faith, not by sight. And sight, in that passage, means, guess what? Sight. Okay, it means literally sight. Like we don't see God because he doesn't have a body. But what you see with your eyes is not the only kind of evidence out there. So to use that verse to suggest that faith and evidence are opposites is attacking a straw man. Okay? So, you guys kind of took the bait. You didn't call me on that. So, there were other straw men out there too. That was just one of them. Yes?
How can you explain to someone like that who's constantly, if you try to like quote anything from the Bible, it goes back to, well, I don't believe the Bible, so that, like, how would we explain that reasoning of faith if they don't say, like, if they don't believe the Bible?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can talk about the reliability of the Bible. You can make that case.
But you could also use their evidence against them. They, like you said, the Big Bang Theory. I would say, well, the Big Bang Theory proves the Bible. It proves about the creation.
Well, I don't know if it gets you that far. But Genesis 1 and the Big Bang do line up. But I don't think that gets him what he's talking about, just like relying on the Bible wholesale. So you need to learn the case and make the case. I'm going to give you guys a packet of resources in the end, and Grant's got one too. And there's some books in there you can read that will give you a good schooling on the reliability of the Bible. And then also, if you go to my website, it's danielcollaborative.com. So Daniel is in the prophet, collaborative is in, collaborative, .com. And then it's probably best if your parents, because you guys are a little young, but if your parents sign up for my newsletter, I will send your parents a list of YouTube resources and articles and short little things that you can, it's basically covering any challenge that I threw at you today, including those Bible challenges. Like one of the resources on that list is a link to an online class from one of the best scholars in the world in the business on the reliability of the Bible. His name is Daniel Walls. And so it's a whole 20-hour course online for free. And it's from, this guy's like when I say the best in the world, I mean that. Like he's the number one dude in this subject. So get that list of resources, and that'll really help you out. So yeah, that's what I'd say. So that being said, let's go ahead and start covering some of the specific challenges that came up, and let's kind of debrief that a little bit. Go ahead.
At the beginning, when you were trying to prove to you that God was loving, you brought up a Bible verse, but you didn't tell us the whole entire context. So.
Okay. You're asking a good question, because whenever a Bible verse is brought up, that's probably the first thing that you should do. So Who here talk about context? I was kind of like, bah, I kind of swatted it away, but you're heading in the right direction, so there's something to that, okay? Now, in this case, reading more of the context in that chapter, I don't know if it really helps, but if you read more of the history of the Old Testament, it's not just like the immediate context, but more like the broader Old Testament context, you will see that God was making that commandment as a judgment of a culture wholesale. Basically, the Amalekites, a lot of people are a little ignorant of who the Amalekites were. The Amalekites were not just another religion. They're not like your friendly Muslim neighbor. Right? The Amalekites did things that made the Nazis look like Boy Scouts. And they had been doing it for a long time. They didn't just have an alternate religion. They were a wicked culture wholesale. If I told you some of the things they were doing, it would really shock you. And God gave them grace for hundreds of years. Like earlier in Genesis, I think it says that I am waiting to bring judgment on the Amalekites because their sin hasn't reached full measure yet. And he waits for 400 years. And then he brings judgment on them. And then another consideration you need to take into account is God did the very same thing to the Israelites when they rebelled from him. He brought judgment, very harsh judgment on them. I mean, he even, the flood was a judgment too. So it's not like he's singling out a culture just for having a different culture or just for having a different religion. It's totally different from that. Now that still sounds kind of harsh to us, but, we're sinners and we tend to minimize our sin. And so that's why it sounds harsh to us. Okay? If you get the resource list, one of the resources that's on the list is a book reference and an article that goes into more detail on the Canaanites and kind of making sense of it. So, yeah, the context does help, but you would need to get the whole Old Testament context and kind of understand some of the historical background. It's not immediately evident from just reading 1 Samuel. Some other challenges that you want to cover and go back over. Does that help, by the way? Go ahead. Was that a hand or a thumbs up?
Yes, really helpful because I live in a private public school.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere there are classes, everybody there is doing stuff, and I tried to do it once and I got shut down immediately, and by thousands of people would come around and just shut me down each time I tried it. So
Yeah.
if I can find a way, if I can learn a way to be able to put in a conversation, put up loads of evidences, I'm going to take it any chance I get because I'm really wanting to try to put that. So that would be very helpful.
Good. And get used to that. Get used to that kind of treatment. I think one of the mistakes that we make in church sometimes is we assume that, if I'm just winsome enough, they're going to like me. All right? If I'm loving enough, then they won't treat me harshly. And it's good to be winsome. It's good to be loving because we're commanded to be so. Because we're carrying the mantle of Christ. So there's that. But don't expect other people to get the message. Okay? No matter how winsome you are, you're going to get piled on. Okay. So it doesn't mean.
I had friends. When I had friends, and then I would bring it up, they would immediately turn on me. And these you're right.
Get used to that. You guys are going to have to be okay and be comfortable with being kind of outcasts in secular society and not being well thought of. That's always been the case. And it's going to continue to be the case more and more. So don't let that intimidate you into compromising and crossing the line. Live not by lies. Okay, I know that we want to be socially accepted, especially at your age. You want to belong to that inner circle. You want people to perceive you in good terms. You're going to have to sacrifice that if you're going to be a faithful Christian. Okay? That treatment has nothing to do with the truth. And everything to do with social intimidation and social power moves. They're not going to refute you. They're going to manipulate you by using social power moves out there. Okay, so again, expect it so that when it does happen, you're like, oh, Okay, and it's not so intimidating. Again, what were some of the other challenges you want me to go back over?
Well, this isn't really a challenge, but did you set it up to be like a lose-lose scenario? Because to me, it felt like no matter what we said, you were just gonna use one of, like, the fallbacks you had were like, well, I don't have to prove anything, or like, I don't believe the Bible. So
Let's talk about that first one, because that was another kind of stacking the deck. I defined atheism in such a way where I had nothing to shoulder, and you guys had the whole. You guys had the burden of proof, right? Nobody called me on it. Okay. Now, let me cover that. So I defined atheism as a lack of belief, and I said, therefore, I don't have anything to prove. You guys are the ones that have to prove to me. You guys shoulder the burden of proof, right? So you do have the burden of proof because you are claiming to believe that God exists, right? So you gotta support that. But it doesn't follow that I have nothing to support, or I have no burden of proof as the atheist. Here's a couple of things. Number one, even if you run with the definition that I gave, even if you say like, okay, yes, atheism is lack of belief in God, that lack entails other beliefs that I do need to defend. So that entails all sorts of conclusions about the nature of morality. I would need to defend those things. All sorts of conclusions about the nature of our origins, how the world came to be. I would need to defend that. All sorts of things about conclusions about human nature. All sorts of conclusions about consciousness and the mind and how that came to be. And I would need to defend all those things. So there's that. And then not all lacks are equal. So if I walk in here and I'm like, you know what? I don't believe in Switzerland. You'd be like, really? Why? And I go, wait. You are misunderstanding the nature of where I'm coming from. I don't believe in the non-existence of Switzerland. I just lack a belief in Switzerland. You'd be like, no. What do you do with that landmass right next to Norway, way up north there? What do you do with the cheese with the holes in it, Like, you still have some explaining to do. And as an atheist, even if it's a lack of belief, I still have some explaining to do. So if you ask me, who's the best female water polo player in the under-23 division in Western Europe, I really have no clue. I truly lack a belief in that context. So I don't have anything to prove if that's the question. But this is God. This is the world. And so that's more like lacking belief in Switzerland than it is the whole water polo player thing. So I still have something, I still have a burden of proof. I still have to do my job. Okay. Lastly, I kind of had a little clever one-liner. I said, hey, you guys are atheists because you reject 99.9% of gods out there. I just go one God further, so there's really no difference between you and me. I mean, you could say, yeah, that is true. I just go one God further, and you guys just believe in one God. But that is meaningless. You could ask, so what? So you ask, here's some questions you guys can ask me. You'd be like, okay, yeah, true. I just believe in one God, and you go one God further. Why does that matter? You could have asked me that question. Because, look, that one God makes all the difference. That's a massive difference. Okay? After all, we don't say there's really no difference between a bachelor and a married man. The bachelor just goes one wife further. Right? The one wife makes all the difference in the world, right? So in this context, that one God makes all the difference in the world. So the thing that I said was true, but it's meaningless. Okay? The reasons why you guys reject Thor and Ra and Krishna are quite different from, it's not like all belief in gods is arbitrary. Because that's kind of what I was making it out to be. I was kind of making it out to be that, Thor and Ra and Krishna was on the exact same boat, exact same level as Yahweh. And the reasons why you believe in Yahweh are totally different than the reasons why you would reject all those other gods. Just like the reasons why you believe 4 is the answer to 2 plus 2. 4, 5, 6, and 7, those answers are not all on an equal playing field. Right? 4 is the right answer. And you can't pretend like, oh, it's just the same as believing 5. No. You get what I'm saying? Is that analogy hitting home? Okay. So hopefully that kind of makes a little bit of sense. That was a little bit of rhetorical jiu-jitsu that I played on you. We have time for maybe one or two more challenges. Grant?
I had a question. So you really set the table to be in your favor.
Mm-hmm.
Right from the get-go, what are some questions that we could have asked to kind of even out the playing field? So you kind of set up these big assertions. What would have been maybe some good questions for us to kind of even it out in the beginning?
Yeah, so the why question or explain more question would be a good place to start. So for example, if I say faith by definition is blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, well, where are you getting, I'm a Christian, so you're saying that's the Christian version of faith. Where do you get that from in the Bible? And make me support it by using the word that you guys believe in. Because if you're going to say that this is the kind of faith that Christians have, you're going to have to support it by talking about your founding scriptures. And I probably would have said, 2 Corinthians 5:7, walk by faith, not by sight. And then you kind of like, well, it says sight, it doesn't say evidence. Like, how do you know that that's what Paul means? So, is that a good example? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's actually talk a little bit more, let's shift gears and talk about how to converse with people like my character. Or really anybody that's in a non-believing setting, okay? Here's a few general tips. And asking questions is going to be one of these tips. The first tactic, the first tip when it comes to having conversations with people is to breathe. Okay? Breathe. Take deep breaths throughout the conversation. That does a couple of things. Number one, when you're breathing, guess what you're not doing? Talking. Yeah. And the next tip is going to be listen. Okay? So it helps you listen. Number two, it calms your nerves. You're not going to be thinking in your reptile brain anymore. You're going to be thinking in your human brain, and that's going to help you do better. Okay? So breathe. Number two, listen. Okay? Because that's just good in and of itself. And number two, it gives you, if you're truly listening rather than trying to think of how to respond, that truly listening will help you, you're gaining ammo. Okay? You're gaining intel that you need to be able to respond effectively. And if you're letting them get out what they have to say without interrupting them, then that you're being a good witness too. Now, if they interrupt you, you can put a stop to that. You say, hey, wait a second. Just let me finish my point, and I'll let you jump back in. So you don't need to let them steamroll you, but other than that, let them say their piece, breathe, so that they have a beat, and then you can respond in kind, okay? Number three, play it back to them. So if they're saying something, before you respond, say, okay, let me see if I'm understanding you correctly. Is this what you're saying? And you repeat it back to them. And then they can confirm and say, yeah, that is what I'm saying. Or they can say, no, you don't quite understand it, and they can give clarification. Again, that shows a good witness. You're showing that you care about them. And number two, when you respond, you don't want to be responding to something they don't believe. You don't want to be going off on a rabbit trail. And you need to check for understanding first. Okay, so breathe, listen, play it back to them. And then number four, be willing to say, I don't know, can I get back to you? If they stump you with something, it is A-okay to admit, really never thought about this before, good question, tell you what, let me think about it, let me get your contact information. It gives you an excuse to continue the conversation later when you're at a better advantage to respond more effectively. Okay? And then, as to Grant's questions, ask good questions. Ask good questions. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple examples in just a second, but the reasons why you should ask good questions are the following. Number one, it makes them shoulder their share of the conversation. It makes them shoulder their burden of proof. So I think one of the mistakes that we Christians make is non-believers make these claims, they make these assertions, and then we get busy trying to disprove them. When we first should make them make the argument and make the case first. They need to articulate it first, then you can respond. And questions help you focus on that. Okay? Similarly, it makes them articulate what they believe and why. And a lot of people have never really been pressed to do that to the degree they need to be pressed. This is something I do to my philosophy students all the time. I'm asking them these questions because they just get up there and they just run their mouths off like they're PhDs. And I just, hey, how do you know that? How do you know that? Like, for example, the other day, it was at the end of class, I was kind of talking with some individual students, and I asked him, what do you think happens to you when you die? This student goes, I just think you rot in the grave. That's it. I said, okay, why do you believe that? And he goes, well, it's just a fact. It's just science. I go, well, how do you know? And you kind of get a little agitated now. It's like, well, it's just, we know there's no soul. Like, we know you're just a body. And I go, well, how do you know that? He goes, we just know this, man. He's like getting a little agitated. And you ask those really simple why do you believe that and how do you know that questions, a lot of people will have a tough time answering. Okay? So it forces them to articulate, and questions are disarming in a way that direct statements are not. Okay? So there's a book that Grant has. We're going to do a giveaway at the end. But if you read any book, read this one. Because this one, it'll do you so much good. It's called Tactics in Defending the Faith by Greg Koukl, Koukl. Tactics in Defending the Faith. So again, we'll do a giveaway over there at the end. But every single one of you guys should get that book and read it, and reread it, and reread it, and internalize the methodology that he talks about in that book. Because he talks about asking good questions. So it really helps you, stay in the conversation better. Here's some examples of some questions you can ask. And they're questions that you can ask no matter how knowledgeable you are on the subject. You can take these questions today and have a conversation at Whataburger 10 minutes from now, and you can use them without knowing a thing what the other person's talking about. Okay? Number one, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? That gets the person to define their terms. Because, let's say all these heavily emotional words like, you're a bigot, you're being systemically racist, and things like that. Well, what do you mean by that? Define, what do you mean by bigot? You just used a negative label to label me. You're not, addressing what I'm saying. You're just calling me a name. Like, what makes me a bigot? Okay? And have I treated you like that? Like, I'm not calling you a name. I'm actually addressing what you say. So that sort of question. Number two, how did you come to that conclusion? So why do you believe that? All right? Number three, how do you know? I just gave you an example of when I used that question in a conversation. It was really funny, man. He went on to say, oh man, there's just, there's no proof. We know that there's no proof. I'm like, well, how old are you? He goes, 18. Who have you read that, how much have you studied this question? He goes, I've studied a lot. Okay, well, give me some names of some authors you read. Because I talk to my friends all the time. Oh, that's some studying right there. You talk to your friends. It's like, yeah, they know what they're talking about. It's okay, well, give me an argument that you've encountered for the soul. Like if you, give me something somebody who disagrees with you has said and why you think that's wrong. He couldn't do that. He goes, there's been no evidence. It's like, dude, come on, man. You might say that you haven't seen any evidence yet at 18 years old, but you can't say that nobody has evidence. Like, what kind of exhaustive survey would you need to do to be able to conclude that? And asking him the questions brought us to that place. Okay? If I didn't ask him those questions, we probably wouldn't have come to that spot. Okay? Here's a question that you guys could have asked in the conversation that would have been really good. I was talking about evidence, like, hey, there's no evidence. Give me evidence, give me evidence, give me evidence. What do you think is a question you should have asked me?
Give me evidence for what you believe.
Not quite.
Where's your evidence?
Nope. Good try, though. How about this? What do you mean by
Evidence.
aha? What would count as evidence? What would count as proof? And I'd probably say, well, it'd be great if he just appeared to me. Wrote his name in the sky. I'd say something like that. And you'd be like, well, is that really fair? You don't subject anything else you believe to that sort of high standards. Why are you subjecting my beliefs to that sort of standard. That's really asymmetrical. That's not being fair. Okay? That's a question that you should have asked and you could have asked. Man, it would have been gold. So read that book, get used to asking questions. Okay? You know, it's great if you get to the gospel in a conversation, but don't feel like you have to. Just meet them where they're at and go where the conversation goes. Your job is to not close the deal. If you do, if you get somebody to give their life to Christ, awesome. But your obligation is to be faithful. If there's an open door to walk through, to be creating opportunities to have spiritual conversations with people. Sometimes you're going to be sharing the gospel. Sometimes you're going to be talking about other things. Don't feel like you need to shoehorn the gospel into every conversation. Okay? All right, I need to kind of close with about 10 minutes more of me talking to you. You guys doing okay? You hanging in there? All right, we're almost done. So I want to end with an encouragement and motivation and a game plan for you guys. I don't want this just to be like today and you walk out the door and it kind of like you forget it. I want you to have a plan for what to do after you walk out this door. So that's what I'm talking about now. Okay, so I hope, here's the reason why I do this role play with different groups. I hope it was a wake-up call. Okay, I hope it was a wake-up call. Just like I said, just like a scrimmage. You don't need to feel bad, but hopefully I got your attention now. I think that we tend to underestimate the challenges that await us in the secular world and in colleges. Okay? How many of you, don't answer this question, just answer this in your head. Okay? How many of you can honestly say that you're owning your walk? And that you're owning your discipleship? You're not just living vicariously through your parents, well, it's how I've been raised, but you're really taking, you're doing it yourself. You're engaging in spiritual disciplines, and your faith is your own. How many of you are taking your spiritual formation, which includes your mind and includes your intellect, seriously? Okay? Without that, if you are not training your mind, you are going to be vulnerable. You are going to be easily fooled, easily intimidated, easily manipulated. You're probably not going to survive if you are not taking training your mind seriously. Okay? So I hope that this was a wake-up call to do that. And this is not about training your apologetics guns on the, quote, enemy. You know, if you're like going out there and trying to like, you know, own them with your superior logic, I think you've got the wrong attitude. Rather, this is about you forming your own backbone. This is about developing resilience to the world. I'm telling you, you're going to need it. It's rough out there. Not because Christianity is false. Not because Christianity doesn't have a lot going for it. Christianity, like I said, we've got an embarrassment of riches in our tradition. We've got good answers. But there's a lot of power against Jesus and his church. There's a lot of social manipulation that's used in a lot of word power plays that just kind of intimidates us because we don't know how to handle it. So the more that you're training, the more you're going to know and be resilient against that stuff and be able to take care of it, at least in your own mind. You know, it's great if you get to use this stuff in conversation, right? That's great. But my number one goal is to give you guys motivation to train your own intellects and develop resilience. Okay. Let me read a little bit of a quote from a guy named J.D. Vance. He's a politician right now. He's running for Senate in Ohio. He's kind of a bombastic guy out there, but you know he's not everybody's cup of tea. But he's got a testimony, and a part of his testimony is like spot on. I don't know if you recognize the name, but he wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy a number of years ago. It's basically his story of like how he grew up in poverty and how he kind of came to success and ended up going to Yale and getting a law degree, and now he's a very successful person. And there was a movie made that was based on the book that's on Netflix. Now he doesn't talk about his testimony very much in the book, and definitely not in the movie, but in some of his other writings he does. He was raised in a Christian home, went to college, lost his faith, became an atheist, and then came back after a period of time. Here's what he says. He says, "My abandonment of religion was more cultural than intellectual. And the truth is, I discarded it for the simplest of reasons, the madness of crowds. Much of my new atheism came down to a desire for social acceptance among American elites. I spent so much of my time around a different type of people, with a different set of priorities, that I couldn't help but absorb some of their preferences. I became interested in secularism and atheism just as my attention turned to my separation from the Marines in my impending transition to college. I knew how the educated tended to feel about religion. At best, provincial and stupid. At worst, evil. I was fitting into my new caste, in deed and emotion. I'm embarrassed to admit this. But if I can say something in my defense, it wasn't exactly conscious. I didn't think to myself, you know, I'm not going to be a Christian because Christians are stupid, and I want to plant myself firmly in the meritocratic master class. Socialization operates in more subtle but more powerful ways. My son is 2, and he has in the last 6 months transitioned from ripping our German Shepherd's fur out to hugging and kissing him gleefully. Part of that comes from the joy of giving and receiving affections from a man's best friend. But part of it comes from the fact that my wife and I grimace and complain when he tortures the dog, but coo and laugh when he loves on him. He responds to us as much as I responded to the educated caste to which I slowly gained exposure. In college, very few of my friends, and even fewer of my professors, had any sort of religious faith. Atheism may not have been a prerequisite to join the elites, but it sure made things easier. Okay, so that's the kind of pressure you're going to face when you go to college, and probably the pressure that you are facing right now to a certain extent. Okay, you want to get in that inner ring. You know, there's a group that you want to belong to. There's some people that you want to like you. And so there's a lot of pressure to compromise. Okay? You don't want to be seen as judgmental. I find that almost universally the case in my classes and students. They will say amazingly irrational things because they're going to such great lengths to not be perceived as judgmental. Okay? I even had students, we were having a discussion on abortion the other day in my philosophy class, and I had students straight up tell me that they would not judge a mother who killed their 2-year-old child because it's her choice. Like they straight up admitted that to me with a straight face. And I think what they're doing there is they don't really believe that. They're just saying that because they don't want to be perceived as judgmental. They don't want that stigma, so they go to great lengths to avoid it. So there's a lot of, you want to be nice. You don't want to offend people, and the world knows how to leverage that against you. Okay, so you're going to need to know that pressure, and training your mind is really key in being able to withstand that. Okay, you're going to get to college. You're going to get in classes, like J.D. Vance said, with very few people that have any sort of religious faith. Sometimes it'll be openly mocked, but more or less it'll just kind of like be a background assumption, like this is just not what serious people believe. Educated people don't believe these fairy tales. And it'll just kind of be like in the water, right? And to recognize that and respond to it, again, you have to be trained up. So the last thing that I want to say, because I know this is kind of running long, I want to give you a game plan. So let's say like, all right, I'm motivated, I want to do something now. How do I take this and make this practical? So let's talk about that, okay? The trouble is that you guys, if you're like most typical suburban teens, you have an incredibly busy schedule. You've got band, you've got soccer practice, you've got this, you've got that, you've got piano, and it's the suburban hustle. Your parents are chauffeuring you to all these different activities, and where do you have time to do reading outside of class? You got AP classes out the wazoo, you got homework. How can you find the time? Okay? The game plan will help you find the time. Okay? Number one, here's how it's manageable. Okay, number one, you don't have to do like huge amounts of study every day. You don't have to get a PhD. But you do need to do something small, consistently, every day, over time. It's just like the same thing with Bible reading. If you never read the Bible, if you never pray, guess what? You ain't connected to Jesus. Okay? So, just try to find 15 to 20 minutes a day. Something small, consistent. You do that every day for a year, and you're going to be totally different a year from now than you were today. You're going to be a lot more confident. Okay, so that's number one. Something small, do it consistently. Number two, to be able to do that, redeem the time that you already have. Okay, here's did you hand me that packet? All right. Chances are that if you look at your schedule and you look at how you spend time in the day, just take one down, pass them around. You will notice and see areas in your day that you can redeem for your intellectual training. So for example, when you're in the shower in the morning, put it on an audiobook. All right? That's 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how long you take a shower. When your mom or dad is driving you to school, listen to a podcast or listen to an audiobook. You don't have to listen to, whatever music you listen to these days. Okay? Get up 15 minutes earlier. There's a thought. Rather than scrolling on your phone at night when you go to bed, put the phone in another room and read for 15 minutes. There's all sorts of things that you can do to gain that time every day. I've just listed a couple of things right here. This isn't an exhaustive list, but it's just some ideas that you can look at to get you started on how to redeem that time. And then the third tip is you guys need to get a hold of your screen time. Without that, you won't be able to find the extra time to redeem. Okay? But if you get a hold of your screen time so that you're not getting those little screen time snacks during the day, like when you're, let's be honest, in the bathroom, or when you're, at night, when you're doing tickle tackle or Snapple Chat or Instagrits, those moments add up, right? You're like, oh, it's just 5 minutes, and then you're like half an hour later. Well, that's half an hour you could have been using to, train yourself. So the bottom paragraph is some ways on how to get a hold of your screen time. So, for instance, when you walk in the door in your house, don't have your phone on you. Put it in a different room so that you're going about in the house phoneless. Because part of the problem is the phone is too close to us. This is like a rectangular heroin needle, guys. If there's a heroin addict and you give him a needle in his pocket, you'd be like, hey man, good luck, you can do it. How long do you think it's going to last, right? Not very long. So it's the same with us. Like, these things are super duper addictive. They're designed that way. All right, these people that make this stuff, they know what hooks you. So don't have it within your reach. Put it away in another room. Now you've got freedom. Okay, and there's tips like that from that first page. Okay, so that's the game plan. Guys, do not go from here and do nothing. Because if you do, you're going to forget this. It's not going to do you any good, and you're not going to improve as a result. You've got to do something. You've got to take ownership of your walk and ownership of training your mind. Make sense? Okay. If you follow these points, you follow the game plan, you're on your way. The second page is just a kind of a book list to get you started. It's not exhaustive, but it'll give you a good foundation. And like I said, if your parents sign up for the newsletter, you'll get a huge list of YouTube videos and online classes and articles that you can use to answer questions. And also, I'll send you a bunch of websites for when you have issues. You can go to these websites, and a longer book list that you can use. So you'll get a lot of resources if you have your parents sign up for the newsletter. Remember, my website is danielcollaborative.com. danielcollaborative.com. Grant, you want to do a little giveaway here and give them your resources?
Yes.
Should we do 80s trivia?
Yeah, really.
80s trivia.
80s and 90s. I'll throw in the 90s.
Does anybody know where Sweep the Leg comes from?
Yes.
Okay. Let me see here.
Please, brother.
All right. Who can answer this question? What movie did the character Biff Tannen come from?
Back to the Future?
You, sir, get a book.
Alright, you get to choose any of these three. Oh wait, can I grab one before you take it? Hey, this is the book, Tactics, that Rich was talking about. Awesome, awesome book. One thing I love about it, very practical. Literally from the first chapter, you can take it and then go and use it. So like as you're reading it, you can use the tactics that he lays out. So highly, highly recommend it. Everyone should go get it.
Probably the only trivia question I've been asked.
Grant, you want to ask a question? You can be trivia or Bible trivia or something else. Whatever. I just had to get the 80s out of my system.
Brant doesn't know the 80s either. He wasn't born in the 80s.
What Jesus' uncle's name? We've got a prophecy in Luke. Think Christmas story. This is Jesus' uncle.
John the Baptist.
That was his cousin. It was John the Baptist's dad, though. No.
Zacharias?
That's correct.
Good.
Good book.
Oh, and can I just, before you take it, I want to say something about it. All right, this is a great one, evangelism and the sovereignty of God. I mean, kind of what we talked about a little bit on Wednesday, but he's looking at like, you know, if God's sovereign over everything, what is our role? And he just really kind of brilliantly and clearly, I love books that bring it down to my level, to our level. And anyway, just awesome book on what's God's role in evangelism, what's your role in evangelism. So, great choice, Noah. Kelly, do you have a trivia question?
Oh.
And no quantum physics question. Please.
Can I not ask them what the second law of thermodynamics says?
Yeah.
Oh, what is the second law of thermodynamics?
Isn't it like the theory that all energy in the universe requires like another sort of energy to like keep that in motion, and so that second energy is slowly dwindling as like everything in the universe is happening.
That's pretty
He's
good.
in the ballpark.
That's pretty solid. You're in the ballpark. The second law of thermodynamics says that the universe proceeds towards disorder.
How do you do it each and every time?
Why trust the Bible? Great book. I know, like, the beginning of the conversation was, like, really just his character, which I thought your character would have a different name than Rich Bordner.
Well,
Is there an atheist name for it?
A. Bordner.
A. Bordner.
Christian and atheist. Bordner, A. Bordner.
A. Bordner. So anyways, this kind of lays out why you can trust the Bible. There's several great versions, but this is a good one. One of the many. All right.
Can I, speaking of second law of thermodynamics, I want to take one thing I said and kind of give you the answer that you guys, I thought you were going to ask about, but you didn't. Do you mind if I do that real quick?
Yeah, go
The
for it.
whole quantum physics jive that I was running with. So I was saying that, in essence, the universe can originate in the Big Bang out of nothing because we see things happen uncaused out of nothing in the quantum vacuum all the time, right? Now, there's a logical error that physicists who say that are making when they say that sort of thing. Does anybody know what an equivocation is? So my CDA-trained young man. No? You're fired. So an equivocation is when you waffle back and forth between two different definitions of the same word. So you're being vague. All right, now, these physicists, they equivocate on the word nothing. Because what they mean by nothing is not nothing. All right, let me break this down. What they mean by nothing is the same thing that you teenage boys mean when you go home and you open the fridge and you say, Mom, there's nothing in it. Okay, that's not nothing, right? The quantum vacuum is not nothing. It is still a vacuum. There's like energy fields flowing through it, and they kind of clash and fluctuate, and that's what allows those electrons to pop into existence out of nothing. All right, but the quantum vacuum and the energy fields, that's still something. So all the physicists have shown is that we can get something from nothing, or something.
We can get
something from something. Yep, there you go. Something from something. They have not shown that we can get something from nothing. So, young man, you're right in the back when you came up to me. A Big Bang requires a Big Banger who lit the fuse. You're still within your rights to say that because we know that out of nothing, nothing comes. And this whole business about quantum physics doesn't overcome that. Does that help settle your nerves a little bit? All right. Pretty much everything I said has kind of the same sort of answer to it. So, let's give you a little taste. Right? You on the right track with all that?
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
Yeah. Thank you for the physics teacher. All right, guys. Thank you.
All right.
Good job.
Hey, let's give it up for Richard. That was awesome. I'm so glad we got to do this. I just want to say a couple last things as we close it out. It's been just increasingly apparent, maybe to you, but also to me as we think about, Scripture and engaging with the cultures, that these are things that we need to continuously be prepped for. You know, we're coming off of a apologetic series, but that's not just a one-time deal. Like, we constantly need to be asking questions and thinking through how do we give reasons, how do we conversate with those of opposing worldviews. There's a book called How to Reach the West Again by Timothy Keller. It's like a 60-page book, but he compares the church today to the early church in Rome. And so think about, like, for the last 60 or 100 plus years, people have come into churches, right? Like, interested, you know, you had Billy Graham doing crusades, people were hearing the gospel. Those days are kind of behind us, right? You don't really see huge crusades. And one of the things he says is, like, the way we will reach the West again is through not so much inviting people, having people come to church because they're curious. That's still one way, but mainly through how we disperse out into the world, like through the different spheres that you're in. So your school, your clubs, all these different areas where you will have conversations with people about the reason for your hope and what you believe in. So anyway, I bring that up just to say that these things are so important. That's why I'm so glad y'all are here. And let me just say, as your youth pastor, I was impressed with how y'all went toe-to-toe with him. I was just encouraged by some of the stuff y'all said. So, well done.
I'd rather have you guys like that than be apathetic. So,
yeah, y'all gave some good reasons, and some of the stuff from like what Matt Morrison talked about with the Bible a few weeks ago, y'all bring up. So, awesome. Let me close this in prayer. I think we have a few more breakfast tacos if you want any. Also, one resource table over here if you have any questions about the books. I can tell you about them. There's also a piece of paper with, like, more resources, websites, YouTube channels, all that. So let me pray for us. Father, thank you for this morning. Thank you for just allowing us to gather together to sharpen our minds and just add a few tools to our toolbox.